Get up. That's what Jesus said to the little girl. I heard it on the radio this morning. On NPR, the 8 o'clock news as I was driving out. A certain president of the United States who apparently didn't have a very good night debating had a rally yesterday in North Carolina to the cheering throng, and he finished his speech with saying, "When you get knocked down, you get back up. Get up." Now, you may have noticed, and you might want to write this down, life is paradoxical and contradictory. Did you know this? I know you do. Paradoxical and contradictory. Now, while I love words, so I looked up the definition of paradox, and one of the ones I found was this. A paradox is a proposition that leads to a conclusion that is self-contradictory. Paradoxical and contradictory. This is our passage. Thank you for reading it. Jerry, it was a big assignment today, so thank you. And this is exactly how Mark presents these two healings. First we're introduced to Jairus. And then we have the woman who's healed in the middle. And then we're back to Jairus. Jesus healing his daughter, Jairus' daughter. Why is Mark presented in this sort of awkward way? Well, the experts say it's because Mark wanted to build the tension. As we heard last week, we hear it again today. Mark is presenting the most powerful healing force in the history of humanity. This is the person that Mark is introducing us to. And underneath that narrative, actually hidden in plain sight, are some timeless truths. Hidden in plain sight, in the midst of this narrative. Mark doesn't come out and say this, but this is what the preacher's job is. I've discovered some timeless truths hidden in plain sight in this narrative, and I want to share them with you this morning. And the first one is the importance of touch. Listen to these instances, and it was really, Krista, I don't say this to embarrass you, but it was really cool because we were hearing about touching. Literally, that moment you touched me, I was like, wait, this is weird, man. This involuntary, why not touch this? Yeah. Listen to this. Listen to the instances of touching in this passage. Jairus, my little daughter is at the point of death. And what does he ask of Jesus? Come and lay your hands on her. Lay your hands on her. And then we have this wonderful notion of this woman who is ill, and she's been ill for 12 years, a nice round biblical number. 12 years, and she does this, instead of a leap of faith, which I'm going to get to in a minute, she does sort of a crawl of faith, right? She does a secret crawl of faith. And what does she want to do? She says, if I only could touch his cloak. And she does. And what does Jesus say? He asks the question, who touched my clothes? Power of touch. And then lastly, we're back at Jairus' house, and Jesus is going to attempt to heal his daughter, and we're told that he went in where the child was, and what did he do? He took her by the hand. The power of touch. This is one of my favorite books, and I've shared it with you before. It's written by a Harvard neuroscientist by the name of John Mattei. He's a neuroscientist, and he wrote this book with the wonderful, and I think it's the most hilarious title, and every time I say that, I say it during a sermon and nobody laughs. I'm going to try again. This is written by a neuroscientist, and the title of the book is this: A User's Guide to the Brain. Thank you. I think that's hilarious. And it's readable. I can understand most of it, because I'm not a neuroscientist. But he's got a whole chapter on touch. And he says that, my notes are all mixed up here. Where is it? I'm glad I'm not taking a preaching class right now. Okay, here we go. I'm going to read this. This is touch. Human beings possess an instinctive urge to touch and to be touched. It is part of the human drive to explore and interact with the world. Touch is unique because it is the only sense that allows us to experience the world through direct physical contact. Touch is also our most powerful and intimate form of communication. A touch can move us and hurt us in a way that no spoken word can, sending messages from comfort to hate across language and cultural barriers. Touch is far more than a sensory apparatus. Our sense of touch affects the development and expansion of our brains well into adulthood. It is a key component in growing, learning, communicating, and living. Touch is the first of the five senses to develop, and it is far more developed than hearing or seeing in newborns. Listen to this. This is fascinating. If you touch an infant's hand, the baby will grip your finger tightly. Nobody has to tell the baby to do that. If you touch an infant's palm, the baby instinctively will take your finger. Nobody had to teach us how to do that. The power of touch. Leonard Sweet is an evangelical pastor, writer. He's written a whole bunch of really good books. And I've been to seminars to listen to him. And he said something at one of these seminars years ago that I'll never forget. He said, when your people that you serve, he was talking to a bunch of ministers, the people that come to worship on a Sunday morning, they should be touched appropriately at least once. We're talking handshakes and we're talking hugs. The science proves that we are healthier if we touch. Again, failing this. Did you know that there's a touch research institute at the University of Miami's Miller School of Medicine? I just recently discovered this. The Touch Research Institute at the University of Miami's Miller School of Medicine. The head director is Tiffany Field. And for 30 years, she's been studying the science of touch. And in this article, she recently conducted a research project at Miami International Airport. And she wrote up a report, and she said that 25 years ago, when you would go to an airport and observe people, take a few days and observe them, she said 25 years ago, everybody was touching. Families were touching, children were asleep in parents' laps, couples were holding hands, sleeping up against each other, and she was incredibly alarmed because her recent studies at the airport showed this. What was everybody doing? You want to guess? Everybody was on an electronic device. Even the young children, right? I've seen it, you've seen it. They give them these electronic devices and they get to play games. Is this a good thing? Is this a bad thing? Well, the people that study touch, I can show you the articles, they say it's a bad thing. People aren't touching. And this scripture this morning, if you take the touching out of it, there's no healing. I was raised by two very loving parents. They're gone now. My dad, Jack, and my mom, Joy. It was a very loving environment. And my dad set the tone. It's always kind of frightening to me to preach and talk about my dad. I'm wondering if he's listening right now, but he was a very proud old Calvinist. You know the definition of a Calvinist, right? A true Calvinist is somebody sitting alone somewhere in a room and they're very frightened because they are concerned that somebody somewhere is having a good time. And God bless my loving parents. We didn't touch each other. There was no touching in my family. And my dad, he was a tough guy. He really was. I mean, in a good sense. He had open heart surgery twice and major abdominal surgery once and lived to be 89 years old. And the first time he had open heart surgery, it was at Riverside Methodist Hospital back in the mid-90s when it was Riverside Methodist Hospital. And we were all in this room and it was time for him to be wheeled to surgery. And not only didn't we touch each other, we also, you don't talk about certain things. Like life, death, you don't talk about these things. So it came time for him to be wheeled down the hall to the elevator, and it was my brother and my sister and my mom and me and my dad in the bed, and they were wheeling him down, and nobody was saying anything, and I thought, gee, is this it? Tears were coming to my eyes, lump in my throat, and you know how you touch a baby's palm and they'll grip you? I broke all the rules. I didn't plan on it. It was an involuntary response, just like that baby taking a finger. But I was on the left side of the bed, and it was kind of time now for Dad to get on that elevator. We were going to say goodbye. Hope to see you later. And I had to do something. So I reached out and touched him on the top of the head. My dad, he died with a full head of hair, and he was a bright redhead when he was a kid. Now, by then it was mostly gray. It was really thick, and I touched my dad's head because I had to do something. And one of the things I thought was, my God, it feels like a steel wire. He came out okay. Lived many, many more years. The power of touch. If I could just touch Jesus' cloak, I'll be healed. Hey, Jarius, I'm going to heal your daughter, and I'm going to take her by the hand. Get up. I'll leave you with this. And I've saved the most important thing for last. It's paradoxical and it's contradictory. And we just heard it and we hear it all the time. But I'm inviting you to take some time this week to dig deep into this, because this is incredibly important, and it's paradoxical and it's contradictory. The woman does this crawl of faith. She touches Jesus' cloak and she's healed. And Jesus senses that something has happened. Who touched my cloak? She's afraid. She thinks she's going to get in trouble. And instead she gets new life. And what does Jesus say to her? Anybody want to answer that out loud? Your faith made you well. What are you talking about? And in some ways, Jesus is saying, I didn't do this. You did it. So I tried to think hard about this week. So Jesus must have been some sort of guy who helped people get in touch with the faith that they didn't know they had. Sometimes you don't know that you've got faith until you need it. Does that make sense? Yeah. Your faith has made you well. It's a paradox, it's contradictory, and apparently it's the truth. So, get up. Get up. And we live. And we are healed. Amen?